I don't know why, but I'm pretty stressed right now. Maybe maybe it's because I have to go to school tomorrow morning, and tomorrow is the first day after the Easter break, which means that today is the last day, and I'm screwed. Anyway, mini albums review 2019. Let's go. So I'm gonna talk about 6 albums this time, actually. So I have to talk really fast. So yeah, most albums that I'm gonna talk about in this video are actually pretty good albums. So nothing to worry about. Unless you are a Logic fan, then you're in trouble, because the first album that I'm gonna be talking about is Logic's Supermarket, and it's not even I can't even consider it as as a studio album, nor can I consider it a mixtape. It's a soundtrack to a freaking novel. Yeah. So yeah, Logic is a rapper that had been in the game for quite some time now, and he had been dropping a lot of mediocre albums leading up to this point, like Everybody or Wise Civ or Young Sinatra 4, whatever. And now we have Supermarket, and apparently he's a novelist now as well. Anyway, this album is like the speeding bullet to heaven for Logic, because this isn't even a rap album. It's not. Like, a couple of tracks here are hip-hop, but all the rest of the tracks here are actually basically indie rock pop songs that are really corny, slick, and actually really basic. A lot of the instrumentals here are really plain and corny and mundane, and the lyrics on this soundtrack, it's laughable. A lot of the lines here are straight up laughable, and Logic pulls a lot of influences from bands and artists like The Killers, early Coldplay, the Benz era Radiohead, Mac DeMarco. There's a track on the soundtrack that's literally a Mac DeMarco ripoff. We have Red Hot Chili Peppers here. We have the Pixies here. We even have a little bit of Nirvana and maybe Neutral Milk Hotel here. And the Killers, if I haven't mentioned them yet. But yeah, this album, it just turns out to be a mess. The album starts off with Bohemian Rhapsody, but thank God it's actually not Bohemian Rhapsody, but with a trap beat. It has some uplifting guitars that are actually really sweet and slick and summery, almost too sweet for its own good. And this, very, very awkward singing from Logic. And, the chorus of this thing, I guess I should know. And then all of a sudden, towards the end of the song, we get this breakbeat transition that's just super out of place and awkward. And then we have the second track, Can I Kick It, which I believe is like a Tribe Called Quest reference or something. And it has some nice cutesy guitars, and Logic has a nice flow on this track, so this track is probably my favorite one on the album. And then we have the track Time Machine, which is absolutely corny. Okay, I haven't read, and I will probably never read, his novel Supermarket, okay? But judging by the lyrics of this set of songs, this story will probably be a mess. And on this track, he kind of talks about building a time machine in order to save one person, probably a woman, actually definitely is one, and then failing because she dies anyways. And yeah, on this track we get some like Neutral Milk Hotel vibes, and then some Nirvana vibes as well, like some 90s grunge rock pop influence mixed fusion, and it's just this very melodramatic and awkward track. And then we have the track Pretty Young Girl, which is hilarious and laughable. It's just this really crappy melodramatic song. It tries to be emotional, but it fails. At the second leg of the song, the strings comes in, and it's like it's trying to imitate a Pixies song mixed with Pablo Honey era Radiohead song, and the singing is bad, as always, on the entire album. And then we have the title track, which is Hideous. He kind of talks about he works in character, he works at a supermarket, and he always wants to creep up and stalk this girl, and it's just hideous. And the lyrics, the references to Radiohead, holy shit, I'm a creep. It's just really, really bad. And there are sections on this song where it sounds almost like a spoken word passage, and it's just really lame. Logic tries to be cute but completely fails, and on the next track it's similar. The next track, Baby, has a more constant drum beat, but the chord progression on this thing is so unoriginal and so familiar, like you've heard it somewhere before. And the track By the Bridge is this really dreary, drab song with a lot of these lyrical cliches, like these metaphors that really leads to nowhere, that really means nothing. And the song overall, if you look at the lyrics here, at first it's like kind of deep, like he finds like a body by the bridge or something, and then if you continue listening to the song, it just gets more and more hollow, more and more ridiculous. The metaphors here, they mean nothing. Okay, the song ultimately builds up to nothing. And then we have the track Best Friend, which is this annoying folk pop song. It almost reminds me of like a Nick Drake song almost, but it's just way sweeter, way more summery, and also really reminds me of Coldplay, like early on, Parachutes, Coldplay. And then all of a sudden we have the track Lemon Drop, which at first sounds really good with some slick, speedy guitars and some really fun, bouncy flows. But if you look at the lyrics, oh my gosh. How many licks to lick your lemon drop? How many licks to lick drop? The chorus is gross, and then the verses are even more gross. Get swifty, get hitty, Rick Sanchez, get swifty. And another verse here, you're racist, you're evil, you're danger to my people. Yeah, this is trash. And come to think of it, this song is actually a Red Hot Chili Peppers ripoff, if you think about it. And then we have I'm probably gonna rock your world. I'm not definitely, but probably. Like, maybe I'm gonna rock your world. Probably. And it's this really atmospheric, moody, dreamy track, and it totally sucks. The production really sucks, as the synths on the track just crashes onto everything, and it's just this really disgusting track. And they even thrown in some funk guitars here and there, and it's just so out of place. And then we have Vacation from Myself, which is a literally carbon copy Mac DeMarco ripoff. I think Mac DeMarco was also responsible for producing some of the tracks on the album as well. So it's almost as if Logic asked Mac DeMarco to help him rip off Mac DeMarco. And then we have the track DeLorean, which has some chill, wavy vibes, but overall it's really forgettable. And then the album ends off with I Love You Forever, which has some grand instrumentals that are really slow and moody and emotional. But, the lyrics are just so patronizing. I think you're beautiful, I think you're pretty, I think you're smart, I think you're this, I think you're that. And it's like a very bad Green Day ballad. So yeah, overall, this album is kind of trash. I'm giving it a 4 to a 3 out of 10. Album number 2 out of the 6 albums, Show Me the Body, Dog Whistle! Yes, so, Show Me the Body, I'm really excited about this album, to be honest, because I really like Body War, and now they're back. And this time, this album is even more raw, and even more hardcore, and actually way harder to digest than I thought. At first, I didn't really like this album, but it just takes a lot of time to digest this album and to like this album. Yes, by the way, Show Me the Body is a New York punk rap band, and on this album they go hardcore. They go metal almost. The album starts off with Camp Orchestra, which is already one of my favorite Show Me the Body songs. The first half of the song is basically these very dark and milky guitar bass slowly climbing up, and then it just hits the climax, and it's this crazy, wild punk rock blast. It's so primal, it's so wild, and what did I even write here? Oh yeah, the guitar breakdowns on the track is so demented. On the track, the band kind of talks about no work will set you free, so they work and they tour, they work and their tour, and they work and their tour. Even though you like what you do, doesn't mean your work is going to set you free. So that's a really good message, actually. And then we have the second track, Not For Love, which is really raw, really filthy. We get some really thick, buzzy bass and some really shouty vocal performances with some sinister guitar riffs. And at first I didn't like it all that much, but later it grew on me. And then we have Badge Grabber. Also, there are some interludes in the middle of the track list. So there's that. Anyway, Badge Grabber. It's a really good anti-cop song. At first it starts off with this deadpan spoken word passage, and it has some skippy, buzzy bass backing it, and then again it hits the meaty parts of the track, the core parts, and it's these brutal, wild guitar freakouts and breakdowns, and it's really awesome. And then we have Drought, whatever, and it's this really wild and deranged, straightforward punk rock track with some really primal drum beats, and I also like it pretty much, even though it's not as special. The track Fork and Knives is another highlight of the album for me. It has some buzzy, thick guitars and some constant drum beats, and at the second half of the song, we just get this really insane and deranged rap rock breakdown that's just really awesome. And then up next we have the track Now I Know, which is the odds one out on the entire track list. It's this really weird, slow, low-key track that's really dejected and despondent and dreary, and it's just, I don't know how to feel about it. And then we have Madonna Rocket, also another single. It has a really straightforward guitar riff that's really wild and loud and sharp, and it's this really solid barn burner that just gives off so much anger and energy. It's amazing. And then we have Arcanum, which is almost as dreary and slow as Now I Know, except the guitars are even more twangy and despondent, and it just really, really slowly builds up to a climax, which is loud and dark, almost kind of dark, not like straight up chilling dark, but kind of in the side kind of dark, and it has a post-punk flair, so I really love it. And then the album ends off with USA Lullaby, which is absolutely angry and wild. I really like the wall of drony noise. The tune is okay, but the song overall just has this really aggressive vibe, like they just hate the USA so much. But yeah, I'm actually pretty satisfied with this album. Really watertight punk rock album. Hardcore, New York hardcore album. Giving it a 7 out of 10. On the contrary, I'm also going to be talking about Flume with his new mixtape, Hi, This Is Flume. So, Aussie electronic musician Flume, he's back from after he dropped Skins, a studio album in the year 2016. And yes, on this album, he's more experimental than ever with some of the most rough and raw and glitchy beats that he had ever produced. And I also find it really amazing that every single track on this mixtape transitions to one another really smoothly and seamlessly. Anyway, at first we have Hi, This Is Flume, tap on the artwork, and then the vocals, the voices, they layer on top of one another, and it leads to Ecdysis, which is this really intergalactic and spacey opener for the mixtape with some really bold drum hits and some glistening keys, and it's really beautiful and pretty and gorgeous actually. And then it transitions to High Beams, which has some plucky keys and some factory beats, and it's really industrial and all. Plus, we get some gritty grime rap on the track, and it's pretty tasteful actually. And then up next we have Jewel, which has some glitchy synths that are glistening like a bird chirping, and some weird melodies that sound like a religious song, but performed by a robot, and it's pretty weird. And then up next we have a 34-second long track. which the title is basically this, but repeated many times. And it's, I can pronounce it for you. It's box drawings, up, double, and left single, lowercase phi, degree sign, degree symbol, well, house emoji, left half blocked, box drawings, vertical, double, and horizontal single sectional symbol. That's the title of the song, and it's 34 seconds long, so it means nothing. And then we have Dreamtime, which has some really bright drones that are really spacey and dreamy, like the title, and it has some dollops and driplets and drops of these percussions, and it's really nice. Up next, we have Is It Cold in the Water remix, a track off of Sophie's latest album, and it's also one of my favorite tracks off of her latest album. And at first it feels kind of like nothing had changed, but on the second half of the track, Flume really worked in some really rigid and raw percussion and beats. While it's not an amazing remix, it feels a little rough around the edges, I still appreciate the effort. And then we have How to Build a Relationship, featuring JPEG Mafia. Yeah, and damn, this might be my favorite track here. Yeah, it has a really nice beat that has some car honking samples embedded in between, and JPEG Mafia's verses are fire. Awesome. Up next we have Wormhole, which has some click-clack beats that reminds me of Flying Lotus a lot, and some really raw, dry snaps. And then immediately after we have Voices, which is this really stripped back, raw a cappella pop track that's really chopped up, and the vocals are actually performed by Sophie as well, with vocal distortion, of course. And it's this weird track that feels kind of out of place, and it plays safe. While it's not bad, it's eh. And then we have Mud, which is this really raw, rough, rigid synths track with some trap hi-hats beneath, and it's really special. And immediately after, it's Upgrade, which is also a highlight on this album, because at first we get these quick strikes of icy, speedy synths that just slithers upwards, like in a really like electronic way. And after a while, the song gains structure and momentum, and it got this really nice techno beat that, you know, the whole thing is just working and functioning now, so that's really cool. After that, we have 71M3, which is a track where it has some stuttery, wonky beats and some distorted vocals, and it's pretty nice. And then up next we have Vitality, which sounds kind of similar, except it has these weird metallic scratches. And it has some nice hip-hop grooves and some colorful walls of sharp keys. And then up next we have Days 22.00, and it has this spacey, humming, messy beat. And on the track Amber, again, we get some metallic scratches that are really twangy, plus some windy synths that are literally like wind. And then the mixtape ends off with Spring, which is super distorted, glitchy, and messy. And overall, I like this album. A lot of the tracks here are short, but they all come together and provide this listening experience. So yeah, I'm giving Flume's Hi, This Is Flume a 7 to an 8 out of 10. Last 3 albums, I spent like 1.5 hours writing the script. Anyway, Foals, UK pop rock band Foals, they are back with Part 1, Everything Not Lost Will Be Saved. So yeah, they make some pretty fun, bouncy pop rock tracks. And the album starts off with Moonlight, which is a really insignificant track. I think they mean to use it as an intro track, but it just doesn't feel like it because it's really long-winded. But yeah, overall it's a little moody, it's a little fadey, washy. And then it transitions to Exits, which is their first single leading up to this album, and I love this song. It's one of my favorite songs of the year so far. It has a really driving and compelling bass line, some fun keys and punchy drums, and the song overall is so catchy, fun, and danceable. And a shout out to Isaac Hempstead Wright for showing up on their music video. And then afterwards we have White Onions, which is also a really energetic track with some plucky guitars and some roaring, fun bass line. And the drums are also really fast-paced. Even though the song feels a little raw and a little drab at points, it's always driven by these loud, shouty vocals that keeps the energy levels up high. Okay, my voice is getting raspy now, so I better wrap this up quick. Anyway, the next track is In Degrees, which is my second favorite track here. It has some really nice shimmery disco grooves that's really nice and catchy, some nice rhythmic layers and patterns, and the chorus where the entire group sings together is actually really nice. Dun 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 dun. It's a really danceable track. It's really fun. I love it. Up next we have Syrups, which is a more laid back and relaxed track. It has some clunky bass, and the song progressively gets trippier and trippier until it hits an explosive climax, and it's really satisfying. And then the next track is On the Luna, which also has some shouty vocals. But yeah, the song just feels way more forgettable. The synths, they are kind of mediocre. And the song overall has this raw, rigid vibe that doesn't really help the track get better, catchier, whatever. So, and then we have Cafe Dathens, and it's an even weirder track. It has some xylophones and glockenspiel, and it's really plucky, choppy, and clunky, and it doesn't feel quite right. And then we have the track Sunday, which is also really relaxing and sweet and summery, almost too sweet and summery for its own good. But it's still a pretty nice track. It's a pretty nice indie folk song. And it has a really fast and hard-hitting ending to the song. And the album just ends off with, I'm done with the world and the world is done with me. And it's probably my least favorite here. It is basically a moody piano ballad that's pretty forgettable, pretty uninteresting, and pretty lightweight. And I'm giving this album a 7 out of 10 as well. And then up next, I'm going to talk about American Football with their third LP, and it's also self-titled again, because all their albums are self-titled. Yeah, so Midwest emo, indie rock band, American Football, they're back, and this album is more mellow and more dreamy and more soft than ever. I still like it though. The album opener, Silhouettes, is actually pretty nice. It sounds so pristine, sterile, and bright and mellow. It almost hits this constant sound that doesn't really fade away, that can loop itself for like 10 hours and not fade away, if you know what I mean. But anyway, the album opener, it's actually pretty beautiful with some strings and nice vocal harmonies. And it does sound a little too clean at times. That's why I was struggling with this album at first, but still, I appreciate it. The second track is Every Wave to Ever Rise, and it sounds sweeter, more laid back, and a little more dreary. And we also have a guest singer here who kind of throws in some French phrase at the end of the track, and it's actually a pretty nice touch. And then up next we have Uncomfortably Numb, featuring Hayley Williams of Paramore, and this song is easily the most straightforward and catchy song here. Catchy, but not like super sweet catchy. Even though the song feels a little rigid at times, and I was struggling to like it at times, I still like it a lot, and the vocals, they're really gentle, so it's pretty nice actually. And then up next we have Heir Apparent, which is a highlight of this album as well. I really like the forlorn, dreary piano lines that back up the choruses. I really love them, and I also really like the reverby guitars. And the chorus and the verses go together really well, really smoothly. And at the end of the song, we get some group female vocals that are pretty haunting, not gonna lie. And then up next we have Doom in Full Bloom, which is a really dreamy, disorienting track that's probably too clean and too stale for its own good. And the next track, I Can't Feel You, it features a singer from Slowdive, and it's actually pretty nice. It does have some shoegaze-esque production in it, and the vocals, they are pretty chilly, and they go up against the very bustly and messy guitars, and they go together really well. The track Mind to Miss is okay. It's a little jammier, but it kind of lacks instrumentation. And the album ending, Life Support, it sounds sweeter than most of the tracks here, but it also feels kind of drabber, and the build up to the song is a little too long-winded. So yeah, while I think this album is really consistent and it's really sound rich, I still think maybe they can like go harder. Yeah, a 6 to a 7 out of 10. At last, I'm going to talk about Sun Kill Moon with I Also Wanna Die in New Orleans. Yes, Sun Kill Moon is a Mark Kozlik. He had been churning out albums for a very long time now. And he dropped Benji, and Benji is one of my favorite albums ever. And recently he dropped This Is My Dinner, and it's actually a really underwhelming album given how long-winded, wordy, and mundane the album sounds. And because Sun Kill Moon, or Mark, is beginning to lean towards the wordy, long-winded, storytelling, narrative-heavy side of music more than actual songs, so it's harder to digest his later material. And same goes for this album, except on this album, the instrumentals here are a little jazzier, a little more lighthearted, and a little more interesting and welcoming, so this album is actually way better than This Is My Dinner, in my opinion. But yeah, if you're not a fan of a storytelling album that's 90 minutes long, you're probably not gonna like it. The album starts off with Coyote, and it has a really dreary guitar line that's really lonely and alienated, and it sort of goes down and go up, and it's just so sparse. And because the song itself is already very long, like 9 minutes long or something, so there are parts in the song where the keys kind of change. It gets a little sweeter, gets a little louder, gets a little faster. There are dynamics in all of the songs on the album. And on the song, he mainly talks about his remorse over this house, and he kind of talks about other topics as well. So it's a really interesting spoken word track that's almost spoken word, but not quite. And it's almost like he's making up all the lyrics on the fly, almost. So yeah, I also like that throughout the entire song, he makes references to having this skunk smell, like maybe there's a gas leak in the house. Anyway, the second track is titled Day in America, and it's this heavy-hearted, tiring, troublesome guitar track, and occasionally we get some beautiful springy guitars that are pretty sad and forlorn. And on this track, he talks about the Parkland shooting incident that's really, really tragic, but once in a while he changes the topic and he starts talking about restaurant chains and bad personal relationships and also gun control. He deals with politics a lot on this album as well, and I love this track as well. The next track, L48, is the shortest track on the entire album. It's a really short song and it feels insignificant in comparison, and the instrumentals, they are a little bit blander. However, the next track, Cows, is my favorite on the entire album because it has a solid groove to it, and the vocal harmonies are actually really nice, and it has a really dreary and hypnotizing guitar riff that I really like. And on the song, he talks about how harmless the animals are and how much he wants to stop eating cows to protect the animals, and that's a lot of heart, actually. And then up next we have I'm Not Laughing at You, and it talks about foreigners laughing at Americans, and it's actually really thought-provoking. And I also really like the cycling drums and the eerie, waily, sparse guitars. And I also really like the rich horns. They are a really nice touch. And then we have the two last tracks. We have Couch Potato, which has some uplifting and optimistic instrumentals. And he talks about deportation, the policies around it, immigrants and all that. And he also talks about how there is a lack of action in Americans to fight against these bad policies. Thus the title, Couch Potato. And I think that's a really well said statement from Mark Kozlik, who usually has a lot to say and usually has a lot of meaningful stuff to say. And the album ends off with Bay of Kotor. Kotor is in Montenegro, and the song is 23 minutes long, and it covers a lot of topics. Of course, he talks about Montenegro, he talks about traveling, but he also talks about his affection for cats and how pissed off he was when he saw someone hitting a dog. And yeah, even though I like the overall vibe of this song, it's pretty sweet, but it's still a little too long-winded, and there are drab, airy, spacey moments, and maybe the song is a little too ambitious for its taste. It's very fuzzy, it's very dreamy, but maybe a little too much. But still, overall, I'm satisfied with this album. I think Mark Kozlik is still one of the most unique artists out there, and I look forward to whatever project he's up to later. So yeah, I'm giving this album a 7 out of 10. So have you listened to these 6 albums? From 1 to 10, how much did you rate them? Like if you like them, hate if you hate them, and subscribe if you want more. And my voice is broken.